Hello, and welcome to this episode of the podcast for the Eastbourne Literary Festival, the festival whose mission is to convince you that you are a writer. I'm Russ Miles, a local writer, listener, and festival instigator, and in this podcast, I'll be chatting to many diverse and interesting writers about how they write to inspire you to pick up the pen, keyboard, or even phone and start writing. Today we are joined by M J Buckman, a local author of the award-winning book Bent is Not Broken, and also the upcoming second book out on the 1st of July, Women of Note. A very, very warm welcome to the show.
Thank you, Russ, and it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
It's wonderful to have you here, and I'm so thankful that you've wrestled with our technical difficulties. We've tried this a couple of times, so it's great to have you on the show. And I'd like, if it's okay, to start with your first book.
Yes.
For those that haven't yet read Bent is Not Broken, can you give listeners a synopsis of what the book is all about and particularly what it really means to you?
I can try. The book is actually about quite a lot of things, but there are three main elements really to it, and they are that it's part memoir, it's part interviews that I conducted, and it's part essays really based on research that I carried out. So in terms of the memoir, I look back at my life as a teenage fag hag. And for people that don't know that term, it's a term that used to be used to describe someone who hangs around with a lot of gay people. That was what my friends called me. And this was in 1980s in London. I was immersed in the gay scene. And I used my teenage diaries as my reference to write the memoir. And I look at the journey that I've taken since those days in London to accept myself. I have lived with mental health issues all my life, and I've always struggled to accept that that's the case. The memoir part is really my exploration of my early years, my teenage years, and the journey I've taken since then. Then the interviews, I conducted in-depth interviews with friends and family from the LGBT plus community, people ranging from their 20s to their 80s. And the more they told me, the more I could identify themes that were coming out. So those themes got translated into the writing. And they included things about accepting who we are, feeling that you're an outsider, and the importance of finding your people, finding your community, all of which resonated a lot with me as someone with mental health difficulties as well. And then finally, I explore LGBT life through the ages, taking a deep look at how society has represented people right up to the present day. And I conclude it all by really trying to pull together what LGBT plus culture can tell us now about inclusivity and tolerance. So I explore what academics and philosophers have had to say about various aspects of LGBT plus culture and history. So that would include things like religion, health and well-being, education, the law, and really what I learnt, which I knew anyway, but what I hope to pull out in the book is that throughout history, LGBT plus people, especially gay men, have been pathologised by doctors, demonised by the church, and criminalised by law. So I really wanted to pull all of that together. And the messages from history, I feel, are just as resonant today, that we all deserve to be accepted for who we are, warts and all, by our society and also by ourselves. And I think just to finish up, there's really worrying evidence at the moment that acceptance of others is decreasing. I'm not just saying that anecdotally. There is evidence from researchers as well, particularly acceptance of trans people. And so I feel that the book hopefully addresses why it's so important to accept ourselves and accept other people and celebrate difference, you know?
Yeah, I do. That's one incredible mission for one book.
It is a bit of a big scope. I mean, I think in a nutshell, it's about we're all flawed, but we somehow find a way to cope. We're all different, but the more we accept ourselves and the more we accept others, the better society can be. And that's where the title comes from. We're bent but not broken. You know, we're humans, we're flawed, and that's okay. Just accept each other.
How wonderful that is. That really is. And I'd like to dive into something you mentioned there a little bit further, if I may.
Of course.
You mentioned there about it being particularly the memoir part of the book, being an exploration of how to accept yourself and your own mental health challenges that you've very openly alluded to there. And then you also said you had a struggle to accept those things. And I wonder what form that struggle takes. And I also wondered if you wouldn't mind sharing how writing the book would have played a part, if it did play any part, in progressing your struggle to accept your mental health challenges and other parts of your life.
That's such a good point, Russ. The book for me was deeply personal, not just because it was about my friends, but because obviously it was about me. And I know it sounds really cheesy, but it was cathartic writing it. It was, I mean, we know that writing is therapy. Writing has been recognised as therapeutic for many years. And really going into my own history and my own struggles helped me accept who I am. And in fact, I came out, if you like, about my mental health after writing the book. I'd always hidden behind a mask. Like a lot of my gay friends, I pretended to be better than I was, and I got very good at it. You know, I even masked having postnatal depression. I found ways to indicate to the world that I was much better than I was. And so writing the book was my way of saying, I have these issues, I've always had them, they are part of me, and it's okay. And if I can just add, the other amazing outcome of writing it is that my youngest son read one of the first drafts. We'd always wondered about his sexuality, and on reading the first draft, he came out. It helped him realise that he could be who he was, and he was in his 20s. You know, people still struggle to this day with stigma around mental health and around sexuality. So writing the book has been an experience that, although deeply personal to me, has also helped my son, and I hope will be able to help other people. If it helps other people think about who they are or how they treat other people or how they might be towards somebody, then my job is done.
Oh, fantastic. Really, it is. It's such a brave and beautiful take on the LGBT plus life through, as you said, you went through a lot of different styles of writing, really, to explore it through the ages. How did the book initially come to life? Could you talk us through the moment when you decided to start such a book and then the sort of journey that it went on? And yeah, was it a quick write? Was it a slow write? How did it evolve?
So, like many of the best ideas, the initial thought started after an evening in the pub. I was sitting in the pub with some friends one evening, and we were talking about Polari, which is often referred to as the lost language of gay men. It was a coded language or set of coded words that men used at a time when sex between gay men was illegal, and having this secret language allowed them to talk with each other openly, and it also allowed them to identify each other. They might say a phrase and another person would understand it, and so they knew they'd found someone from their own community. So I was fascinated to hear my friends talking about Polari, and I asked if I could meet up with some of them to discuss it more, with the idea I might write up their stories. So began the interviews, really. But what really quickly became apparent was their stories were so much more than just how they used to communicate, how they used to speak. And I wanted to record more about their lives. And so the more they told me, the more these themes emerged. And it's actually my husband who suggested that I might want to write a book about this. I'd always wanted to write a book, but never quite known what it was going to be about. So I sat down and I started researching and making notes. I have to say there was no set plan whatsoever. The book evolved. It was hard work writing it, as you can probably imagine, because it was about so many different things. But it was also great fun because I got to think about how I would turn it into something readable and cohesive. And the more I wrote, the more I researched it, the more I realised there wasn't really another book quite like this, written from the perspective of an ally to the LGBT plus community. So I thought, I might have something unique here. That actually turned out to be a blessing and a curse at the same time. It's different, which is good, but it's very hard to categorise, and it's very niche. It's been very difficult to sort of place it really amongst other books, which obviously in this day and age you have to do. Everything has to be in a genre. To answer the second bit of your question, or the next bit of your question, it took me 4 months to write the first draft, and that was working pretty much every day, probably for 2 or 3 hours, sometimes a bit more a day. I find I work best in little bursts. And the first draft was a bit of a stream of consciousness, I have to be honest, and was about
Yeah.
130,000 words. So I knew I needed to hone it down a lot before I could send it off to a publisher. The next stage was obviously submitting it to publishers, and I chose publishers who took submissions directly from authors. There aren't that many of them, but actually the numbers are on the increase now. And I was absolutely gobsmacked that I got taken up by a traditional publisher on my first round of queries. And it was amazing experience, I have to say. They helped me edit, they helped me really sort of think about what order everything should be in. And it ended up being in a completely different order to where it was the first time round, but a much better book because of it. So the book that I ended up with was quite different from the one that I started writing, but it was much better as a result of the professional editing that I had from the publisher. And it took almost exactly a year from when I started, well, from when we had that chat in the pub to when the book was published. So, yeah, a year in the making.
And that, believe it or not, is actually quite fast.
Is it?
It is, yeah. Compared to some of the people we've spoken to, it does sound like you've, for a book that is, as you say, not easy to pigeonhole,
Mm.
and
Mm.
to be able to find a publisher, a traditional publisher that gets it, gets you, loves it, and is going to take it through relatively quickly to publication. That's wonderful to hear. I mean, I hope it brings a lot of heart to our listeners that this is possible. This is doable.
Absolutely, and that's one of the main reasons I wanted to talk to you today, Russ, is to encourage people, which I think we'll come on to a bit more later, but to really encourage people, especially older people. I mean, I suppose I did have a slight advantage in that I have written professionally all my life, but it was more academic writing. So I have been published, I've had some papers and things like that published, so I did know about the process of writing. This was a different, writing a book is a completely different kettle of fish. But yeah, I would really encourage people to do it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Before we get into that story of how you got back into the writing and that encouragement that I know you can share, you mentioned there that you came from academic writing. You've been doing a lot of academic writing,
Mm.
and it's quite a jump to writing a book and maintaining that attention and interest and immersion into the stories you want to share, the information, the memoir, and everything else that you put into that book. How did you find the jump from academic writing to writing something of this longer form?
I think for me, the thing about writing is I've always enjoyed it, whether it's writing policy or healthcare papers or commissioning guidelines, which is the sort of thing I used to write. I've always really enjoyed it. So in that sense, it wasn't such a leap because I really enjoyed writing the book. I think what was the challenge was to write something so big. But I suppose, again, I don't really suffer from writer's block, which a lot of people do. If anything, I suffer from writer's diarrhea in that I can't stop. I just write. So in a sense, it wasn't such a huge leap, possibly. And I think, again, I'd say to people, if you've got any experience of writing, or even if you haven't, you never know until you try. And I think I was reading something that Margaret Atwood wrote. I was reading it today, actually, about what she wrote about writing, that writers are optimists. We don't write because we think we can do it, which sounds really arrogant, but why else would you do it? You write because you think, I might be able to do this. And then if somebody else actually reads it, I mean, it's just the most amazing feeling in the world. So does that answer your question?
It really does. It does indeed. I think I think it's great that you can sort of double down on that enjoyment of
Mm,
writing, because we got the same sort of perspective from Holly Seddon, but one of our very early episodes of the podcast, where enjoyment, it feels almost slightly counterintuitive and certainly against the mythic vision of author struggling and bleeding onto a page in a corner somewhere, to
yes.
say, actually, this is something that I'm enjoying doing. There's probably an element of being compelled to as well because of that enjoyment. It's a virtuous cycle, perhaps,
Mm,
but it is an enjoyable activity. And I think it's interesting to leave that with some of our listeners, because some of them, I imagine, have got a book in them that they would love to write, but their memory of writing, their association with writing, is with writing at school
yes.
or writing under heavy criticism, those sorts of activities. Whereas what we're hearing now on the podcast and from yourself as well, that this is an enjoyable activity. This is something to take a tremendous amount of enjoyment from, even though you were writing about a subject and a topic that is emotionally extremely charged,
Yes.
extremely close to you.
Yes. I mean, it was very tiring. Um, and as I said before, I needed to take breaks quite regularly, especially if I'd written something about an episode, a mental health episode, for example, and I do write in some detail about that in the book. But I just felt compelled. I felt compelled to do it. I think also, if people feel they can't write, keeping a journal is a really good way to start. Just recording the things you do in your day, but then how that makes you feel. And that's something that I've learnt with writing as I've got older, that it's the feeling behind it that readers enjoy. And if you can get that into your writing, you are halfway there. So, I think journaling is a really good way for people to start on that.
One of the things you mentioned there as well was working with an editor.
Mm,
And you're working with an editor at a publishing firm, a new publishing firm. So it's a new trust relationship that you're
yes.
building. And they're editing something so close to you, so personal, so intimate, and so important. And I wondered if there was any part of that process where pieces were taken out or there was an edit made that was challenging for you as well. Because, as you say, you went from 130,000 words down to what is usually approximately 80, 90,000
It
in
did end up at about 100,000.
about
So it's
100.
still quite a
Yeah.
long book. Yeah, there were bits that had to come out that I initially felt a little bit upset about. It was my first time, um, obviously writing something quite so personal for anyone else to read. I'm used to being critiqued for my writing, so it was, things about grammar and anything like that I was absolutely fine with. But bits of the story that needed to come out, I did have to have a moment. And when they suggested that we completely change where the book starts, I was like, oh, okay. But as soon as I started rewriting it as they'd suggested, I got it. I got what they were saying. But the thing that really helped me was that they helped me to delve deeper, to find my voice. And I think that was something I will always be grateful for, because they took me on, based on a manuscript that they read, and they thought it needs a lot of change, but it's got promise. And they said, if you do as we're asking, we will publish it. And I just went, yes. And it wasn't always easy. You have to kill your darlings, as they say. There are some
Yeah.
things that you need to let go of. But I think the experience taught me, and this is something that I've learnt for the second book as well, that when you write a book, it's yours. When it's just on the computer in front of you or in your notes, nobody else has seen it, it belongs to you. When somebody else buys that book, it's theirs. It's theirs to do with what they want, and you have to stop being quite so precious about it. So actually the editing experience really helped me learn that, and learn that I had to let go.
I think that must have been a wonderful thing to learn. Also, quite a lot of trepidation. in doing that. And I can understand that completely. I'm trying to get into my own headspace here of writing such a wonderful personal book as a first book. I've written a few, but nothing as powerful as what you've achieved with Bent is Not Broken.
Well, thank you very much. It's it's almost been a lifetime in in development, because the story starts with my childhood and my initial struggles. So yes, it's been a long time coming.
Absolutely. And actually that works really well to ask you about when you wrote it. Because we've spoken before about the fact that your book was published when you were 60.
Yes.
And then, I mean, that one question is why then, but perhaps you've already answered that to some degree because it was a book with a lifetime in the making, and it's impossible sometimes to publish something earlier than that. Although you look at a lot of autobiographies out there and you think maybe not. Um, so why then, I suppose, maybe why did you choose then to
Mm.
bring this work to the public? And what advice maybe did you wish you had as you began to get back into a new form of writing life? Is there any advice you wished you'd been given, or any words of comfort or momentum and motivation that you wished you'd received?
I suppose that the main thing is that I was retired. I took early retirement for various reasons, and I finally had the time and the headspace to give to it. I know some people manage to write books when they have young children and jobs and households to run and everything else. I couldn't do that. So for me, the timing was just right. As you say, it partly was because it was the right time in terms of the story to tell that story, but also it was the right time in terms of me having the headspace to do it. And as I said before, I didn't actually know I was going to write a book when I started initially making some notes, and I didn't realise where it was going to go. So I think the advice I wish maybe that I'd been given is the writing, as far as I'm concerned, is actually the easy part. Getting ready for publication and the subsequent marketing is, for me, much harder. I mean, even doing things like this, it makes me nervous. I feel anxious. I'd much rather be sitting down writing, if I'm honest. But, this we need to be out there. We need to be talking about these things. So I appreciate that I have to do it. I think what I also learned is that I was a little bit naive about how some people might receive the book, and I was trolled, which is why I chose a pen name, because I wanted to protect my friends, my LGBT plus friends, who gave their stories on the understanding that it was all done anonymously, because some of their families don't know all of their stories. So I just said, well, I'll have a pen name as well then. But actually, because M J Buckman was trolled, I was able to protect my private life, my family, my friends from that trolling, because MJ Buckman got trolled rather than me, my private self. It was in some ways very scary being trolled, being told by people who don't know you, who don't know anything about you, that you are an abuser or that you encourage abuse. I won't go into the details here, but it was very bad and it made me want to stop completely. However, I realised actually this is all the more reason why I need to do this, because we need to try and keep going with these messages of acceptance and just tolerance, just tolerating one another, for goodness sake. On a lighter note, I think I would have advised myself to read up a little bit more about the craft of writing a book. I just kind of ended up doing it. But there are two things in particular that I came back to when I was working with the editor. One is showing and not telling. So rather than just this happened, that happened, this happened, that happened, it's much more about the emotion behind something and evoking an emotion through the words that you choose. And the second thing was learning about the beats of a story, when a story slows down, when a story speeds up, and how to get the most impact out of a story, whether it's fiction or non-fiction. And there's this thing called Save the Cat. I don't know whether that's something you've come across.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yes.
Jake Snyder. I think.
That's
Yeah.
right. So it was originally written for screenplay writers,
Mm.
but it's now been adapted for all forms of writing, and you can watch videos on it, you can buy books about it. If I'd done both of those things, showing and not telling and saving the cat, learning about those, it might have saved me some time editing. Me being me, I just throw myself into things, so maybe I wouldn't have listened to the advice anyway. But yeah, that's in theory what I would have told myself.
Fantastic. And actually, you mentioned there about the trolling that your pen name received, that alter ego, that alter identity to some degree, and something that helped you achieve a safe space when there is that trolling. And I remember there was a person that taught me to write best-selling technical books, so nothing as amazing as what you've produced, but something in a different form.
Yeah.
And she said two things that really resonated. The first thing she said is you want 5-star and 1-star reviews. You don't want any threes because that means you didn't really hit a mark. And so it's almost, I'm not in any way endorsing the trolls, believe me, but the fact they exist probably is one signal that what you've written is important and probably says everything you really wanted it to convey. So there's that one, and the other thing is that this lady that taught me to write these best-selling technical books, she spoke about Save the Cat as well. That's how I was introduced to the very book.
Yes, indeed. And I think, what you were just saying there about the alter ego, it's very much me. I'm absolutely me. Whatever I do, whatever I write, all it is that I'm protected by the pen name. I think people have sort of said, oh, is it like, can you reinvent yourself? And it's not that. I'm not hiding, in a sense, me. I'm just protecting my private life.
Absolutely. That's perfect. I'd love to talk about your second book, your latest book, if
Mm.
that's okay.
Yes, of
So,
course.
Women of Note. It's coming out on the 1st of July. I assume everyone can buy it from the usual mechanisms. It looks absolutely beautiful. It does look so gorgeous. Can you share a bit about the book and about where people can get it? And also, if there's another mission for your second book?
Yes, yes. So I'll start with where people can get it. It's on Amazon to order as a paperback. It's also on various different ebook platforms, which you could look at my website or at the publishers, Uplit Press, for more details about that. But I'm absolutely over the moon that it's just also been accepted by Waterstones. So, for a British author to have their book in Waterstones, it's like a dream. And in fact, they've taken both the books just in the last couple of months. So I feel. I mean, I have imposter syndrome at the best of times, but I just feel, how have I deserved this? What have I done to deserve this? But there you are. That's where they're available. So, Women of Note. I mean, I didn't think I'd write one book. I certainly didn't think I'd write two, and I absolutely never thought I'd write a novel. I didn't know I had one in me, but there you go. If I can do it, at the age of 61. So, like the first book, really, Russ, it developed organically, and this time it was inspired by a visit to an art exhibition, and the exhibition was as much about the story of the artist and her lover as it was about the art itself, and I was fascinated by this story. And over the next week I researched this couple further, and I wrote an imagined letter from the artist to her lover. I thought, oh, that was fun. So I started then looking at other women in history and writing imagined letters from them based on their real lives. So for each one, I spent maybe a week or so researching the person and thinking who they might write to and what they might write. And this was just a hobby thing, really. It was just, a nice thing to do in retirement. And again, it was my husband who said, well, maybe you could write another book. And I'd written, I suppose, about 10 letters. And then, again, this sounds really cheesy, but it is what happened. A story just arrived in my head. And I know other people say this, and I remember Elton John saying this about the way he writes music. It just arrives. And I just thought, oh, rubbish, that can't happen. And it absolutely did happen. This story arrived in my head, which was quite a surprise. not to put too fine a point on it. So I started writing this story that weaves the letters together. In terms of themes, the themes in the second book are similar in some ways to the first. They're about accepting who we are and about recognising one another's achievements and our own achievements, and also about learning from history. But it's also specifically for this book about we're all on our own journey and all our voices deserve to be heard wherever we are living and whenever in time we're living. And for much of history, women's voices were not heard. So this is my little way of trying to make a contribution to try and ensure that some of those forgotten voices of women who did remarkable things are heard. It's a combination of historical fiction and contemporary fiction, the historical fiction parts being in the form of the letters themselves, and the contemporary story follows a woman called Helena, who is a librarian who comes across this collection of letters, and the more she reads the letters, the more she reflects about her own life and where her life is going, and she learns from these letters about how she might live her own life going forwards. So it explores how her life changes as she immerses herself in the letters.
I'm a big fan myself of reading letters from the past anyway, so the form alone appeals to me. And there's also, I don't know if you've seen the performances in London. I think is it Letters Alive or something like that. We'll find the link and put it along with everything else with the podcast. But it's a wonderful thing where often a great actor will read out a letter from the past, and it will possibly be from a famous or not so famous person, but it's usually wonderfully performed, and you get this window into a world that can change the window on your own world now. So it's perfect. It sounds like a really wonderful book.
I mean, that's exactly what it's about. And Helena is encouraged to write a book about the letters. And I think going back to what my message is really that I want to put forward today is, especially to older people, you can write. Helena realises this, my character. I realised it, and I know it's a central theme for what you're promoting as well, that, this book really explores that. It explores the process of writing as Helena goes through it herself.
And it comes out on the 1st
It
of
does.
July.
Yes.
And is that going to be on the shelves on the 1st in Waterstones, or is it going to be available online a little bit before and then it will gradually work its way onto
That's
the
the plan.
shelves?
That's the plan in first. When I approached our local Waterstones about the first book, because it wasn't in their catalogue, it was more difficult for me to sell it to them. This time I can try and sell, and my publisher also, but they've said it's good for me to actually have a physical presence if I can, to go in and sort of try and promote the book personally, and they've got it in their catalogue this time. I'm going to force myself to do a bit more face-to-face stuff this time, actually going into bookshops and taking a copy of the book in and asking people if they'd consider stocking it. It's against everything that I want to do, but I'm going to give it a go.
It's an interesting thing just to speak about. You mentioned earlier that the sort of promotion and the marketing side is one of the less desirable for you
Yes.
parts of the job.
Yes.
How do you approach it? How do you get on with it? And it sounds like you're still on a journey with it, if that makes sense.
I certainly am. I have a marketing plan, and what I commit to do is something every day. Whether that is, for example, last week I wrote into The Guardian. They do a regular feature about people's lives after the age of 60. So I've written a piece. I've submitted a piece for that. I might do a Facebook post. This week I'm meeting with a local marketing firm to look at doing some targeted advertising on social media. So I have a multi-pronged approach to marketing, which means that every day when I wake up, I think, right, what do I feel in the mood for today? I don't feel in the mood to talking to anyone. I'll just write something, or I'll just do a bit more research, but I will do something every day from that plan. And I think having the plan just gives me that framework. It makes me sit down and think, right, what can I do today that's useful? towards the marketing. And it's something that you do, I mean, we're still doing it for the first book, and that came out nearly 2 years ago. You don't stop, really. I mean, I even carry around, I've had little bookmarks made, and I carry those around and give those out to anybody who'll have one.
It's a strange part of self-promotion that as a writer you are almost trying to avoid.
Yes.
And yet at the same time, it's part of the business element of it that, it is something very hard to avoid in the end.
Yes, and if you're like me, you're with a small traditional publisher. They will do a huge amount. I mean, they do press releases. They do an awful lot to promote the book. But you are also expected, to do a bit and to do your best. And I think that's something that I had to learn as I signed the first contract, that actually I had to take responsibility for quite a chunk of marketing. And I
Yes,
think we've
yeah.
got 8 million books on Amazon at any one time, something like that. You have to do what you can.
It's a busy marketplace for sure. And if anything, we're hoping with the festival to make it more busy.
Yes.
So, towards the end of the podcast, we usually have a few questions we love to ask. One of them is become a bit of a theme across the podcast series is if you could go back to yourself when you were younger, 16 years old, something like some formative moments perhaps in your life where you needed to hear something that would have kept you going, might be giving you a little bit of solace, a little bit of shoring up at that moment. What would you have liked to have said to yourself in that moment?
Honestly, what I would like to say to the 16-year-old me is find someone to talk to. I was so ashamed of many parts of my personality and my appearance, and I didn't ask for help. We were talking about the 1980s when I was 16, so the world was a very different place. There were very few outlets for people to talk about mental health. Certainly teenagers, there was really nothing. So I would encourage myself not to be ashamed of who I am. And whatever my concern is, whether it's about mental health, about weight, about sexuality or gender identity, ask someone, talk to someone. These are things I talk about in my books as well, and I think they're still very relevant to this day. And then I think finally I'd say to myself, your path to becoming an author is going to be a long one. But you will get there, and you will use your life experience as inspiration. And in the meantime, you'll have a career, you'll bring up 2 amazing sons, you'll retire to the wonderful South Coast, and who knows, you might even end up being interviewed about it all one day.
You absolutely have been. And I'm sure I'm just one of the early ones. When the book comes out, when your next book comes out, there'll be a flood. I don't want to introduce an anxious moment to the end, but there'll be, I'm sure, a flood of people that want to talk to you about these incredible books that you've written.
That's very kind of you. Thank you.
It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the podcast, M Buckman. The new book is out on the 1st of July. That's Women of Note. So find it online and then hopefully soon find it in Waterstones. I hope everyone gets a chance to see M Buckman out and about promoting her book. But be kind. She's probably a bit anxious about it.
She is.
Yeah, absolutely. Approach with care and kindness at all times. Thank you, M Buckman, for
Bless you.
coming on the podcast today.
Thank you so much for having me, Russ.